Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Call Together. And my guest today is Vince Warnock from New Zealand. And I'll say this, and I had a guest yesterday from Australia. We love to hear accents. We have one coming up. He's in the UK. So we're just talk about the weather. We just love to hear accents. So that are accents to us anyway in the States. So we're so glad to have you here today, Vince. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I so thought for a second you were going to say that New Zealand's part of Australia, which is a huge mistake people make.
It is not, and I am so aware.
It's basically the same as US versus Canada. Okay,
right, so, exactly.
Yeah.
But I will say this: I have this little list, and I do get to travel for mission. So I have been to several countries, but I have this list, and New Zealand and Australia are definitely, because they're kind of off by themselves. So I'm like, I've got to get there. So one of these days that'll happen. So we're going to talk today, actually a little bit. It's like an eclectic conversation today, which I love. God wants to be all up in our business in every area, and so our stories of God in our life is super eclectic, and it's beautiful, and it's messy, and all those things. So we're going to jump around today, which people love because our lives jump around. So we're going to talk about chasing insights. And so we're going to start there, actually. Tell us a little bit about where it came from and what kind of led up to you going in that avenue of where you're at right now.
Yeah, so thanks. Long story short, So my background, I'll go right back for a second. So my background is I was trained in electronic and computer engineering, and then software engineering, and even worked on radio as an announcer for a number of years as well at one of our big radio stations here. But one of the things I kind of found that the electronic side didn't excite me as much as I thought it would. And the reason I wanted to do it was I always wanted to be the guy that made all the gadgets for James Bond or Batman. Turned out that's not a viable career option, by the way. So once I figured that out, it was like, okay, what's important to me? And I realized technology and people. They were the two things that I was fascinated by why people behave the way they do, why they do certain actions and things, and then discovered that the intersection of those two things, of course, is marketing, and fell into marketing. Turns out I was relatively good at it, and so for years worked as a digital marketer until I finally made the decision to go off and start my own companies, and the biggest one of those I sold about 5 years ago, and it was a startup in the kind of accounting technology space. And then moved to Cigna and finally became the chief marketing officer at Cigna here in New Zealand. And through that whole process, one of the things I've discovered is there's a pile of different frameworks and things that I've had to learn when we're building your own companies or when you're dealing with other people that get really good transformative results. And I brought that into the environment at Cigna. We saw incredible results there. And what would happen was I would travel the world, back when we could travel one day.
It seems like a whole lifetime ago, doesn't it?
It's so strange. Yeah. But I would travel. We would get all the different Cigna markets together, or we'd get a whole pile of marketers from around the world together. And what would happen is everybody said, oh, hey, I need more information on that. Can you talk me through your frameworks? I need more. Can you support me on this? And they would always request an hour a week of my time to dial in and talk with them and coach them. And then I realized the sheer amount of Cigna markets, that was already over a full-time job. And I'm going, maybe I can do this more efficiently. Maybe I can put down a lot of my framework stuff into a book. And then they can buy the book and I'll get some money for it, which was a good theory and did work.
Yeah. You're like, this is brilliant.
Yeah. So that's where the idea behind Chasing the Insights came from. It's from one of my mantras that I've always brought to digital marketing, which is you don't chase the wins, you chase the insights. Because if I'm huge on experimentation and trying new things with marketing. But to do that, you need to have the right frame of mind. You need to ensure that you're approaching it with it's not a win or fail, because the fails do impact you, but it's a win or you've learned something. So that's the approach I wanted to bring. So, and the other cheeky motivation behind writing a book. So I used to work with this really angry person who was an author, and one day they kind of lost the plot with me, and because I used to get a lot of people asking for me to travel around and teach and coach people and things. And we had more people asking for that, and it came up in a leadership meeting, and they just lost it. And they were like, why is it always Vince? He's not an author. He wouldn't make an author's a-hole. And I went, wow, I'm standing right here. But also, anytime someone says to me you can't do something, it's a high motivation for me to do it. I'm really
Right.
cheeky,
Yes,
so
they
I
just
thought,
threw
right,
down the gauntlet of a challenge. You're like, well, now
uh-huh,
I've got
oh
to
yeah.
do this.
So I will neither confirm nor deny if I sent them a copy of the book signed from the author's a-hole when I published it, but it was very childish. But so that was the motivation for writing the book, and the response I got was phenomenal. The other thing, by the way, someone said don't do was a book launch. They said no one turns up to book launches anymore. Don't even bother. And I went,
Yeah.
I'm a marketer. I'll hold my beer. I've got this. So
Yes.
organised a book launch. It was incredible. We had 100 or so people there in a back when we could meet in physical locations,
Yeah.
and the response from everyone was so encouraging. And I got
Mm.
to talk them through an important part of the journey, which was unfortunately the passing of one of my sisters. So my
Yeah.
sister had over a year long battle with cancer, which she finally lost. But that had, like, my goal was to write my book, but the time that I would usually write was interrupted by this and by being supportive and things.
Mm.
And I say interrupted, I would never change a thing. Like, she was more
Sure.
important than
Yeah.
any
It's
book.
just life. It's a
Yeah,
life change.
yeah.
Yeah.
And she was my only older sister, and she was my rock as a kid because we grew up in a not very nice environment. But she was amazing and supportive and things. And so being able to be there for her was really important. But also, by the way, the last thing she said to me, I got to say goodbye, which is something not many people get to do.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
got to say goodbye to her properly, and she said to me, "By the way, that book." And I went, "Yeah." And she goes, "If you don't finish that book, I will effing haunt you." And I went, "Wow." She's not a Christian,
Right.
but yeah.
Yeah.
But I was like, "Okay, I need to finish this book." So,
Yeah.
so it was an incredible event. I got to share the stories. I got to thank people for their support. But then something happened that night. So I'm a high extrovert. So being around people's energy, I'm energized. I was like, yes, this is great. I'm loving this.
Right. You're in your zone. Yes. Your
Exactly.
happy place.
Yeah. But I also knew that I was going to face a challenge when I was there. And I've always, through my life, suffered from self doubt, from imposter syndrome, from not feeling worthy. So I knew that I was going to have to sign copies of the book. And that was an interesting challenge in itself because I'm going, look, I'm a barely average karaoke singer. I'm not a celebrity. This could be awkward. But I knew if I went to a book launch, that's what I would want to do. I would
Yeah.
want signed copies. I would want people to do this because it's the way I support them, but also it's just cool.
Right.
So I could
Yeah.
rationalize it in my mind. I went, right, I've got this sussed. I'm going to do this. But what I didn't, and I did it, and signing the books was fine. But what I didn't expect was what happened after that. Every time
Mm.
I handed them the book, they would say, "Oh, I can't wait to read it." And my stomach started knotting more and more, more and more. And I suddenly realized, oh, that's right, people are actually going to be able to read my book. And I went home, and all these stupid voices in my head, like, I kept hearing, who do you think you are? Who do you
Mm.
think you are to write a book? What makes you think you've got anything to add to people? Everyone's going to read the book and go, oh, amateur. Now
Right.
the evidence didn't line up with that at all. Like, the book
Mm.
sold incredibly well, even without marketing. It went into the bestseller status. I'm like, okay, this book is doing very, very well. And the feedback I was getting from people was how they were using it with their businesses, how they were using it in their entrepreneurial endeavors and things. And I was like, this is
Yes.
changing people's lives, and it's going really well. But my internal voices are telling me I'm not worthy, and that, as I know, doesn't line up with what God says.
Yeah.
So I realized I had to deal with this, and weirdly, it was one of my mentors called me up, and he was an author. He's published many books. He rang me up and he said, "Oh, hey Vince," he's from America, and he's like, "Hey, how's the book sales going?" I said, "Oh, really, really good." And he goes, "Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen any marketing out there." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm a chief marketing officer. I'm really, really busy. I'm just relying on word of mouth." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm going to call you on that." And he said, "Do you know what I go through every time I publish a book?" And he just outlaid that exact story to me. And
Mm.
that's when I realized, like, that helped me to know that I wasn't alone, and helped me to know
Yes.
that this is kind of what people go through. So I knew I had to talk about this a bit more. I also knew I had to deal with the insecurities and deal with the self-doubt, because that's not what God had planned for me.
Yeah.
So I started talking about it more, and that whole then led to a long process last year of realizing that I needed to write another book on this. It's
Mm.
cool, and so it's the book I'm working on at the moment. But also realizing I'm called to help other people, because I've seen the evidence of that with the people I coach. I've seen the businesses I work with flourish, and I'm like, so once you once you realize you've got a calling, by the way, that's when it becomes really, really frustrating. So I'd turn up in the office and go, I'm feeling really unfulfilled. Now, to be clear, it was a great job, wonderful people. I love everyone I work
Yes.
with there. I love most of the people I work with there.
Right.
And they paid me an obscene amount of money, which is also very nice, by the way.
Yes.
But I also knew that I had this calling, and I knew I had to
Yeah.
act on it. And I think you and I spoke beforehand. One of the things, I'm going to take a sidetrack for a moment. See, this is the
Yeah.
eclectic nature of this.
I know, this is great. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is so my zone. This is great. I like all over the place. Yeah, it's good.
But one of the things, like, there's a couple of core principles as a father. So I've got two kids, myself and my wife Leanne. We've got a 23-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old son. And there's a couple of principles that are really important to me. And one of those I'll talk about later. But one of those was just don't be reliant on income or on a job, because it's fickle. And as we've seen in this economy at the moment, so many people's lives have been impacted. Unemployment rates are up, and people's entire livelihoods are just being pulled out from underneath them, which is terrible. So I've always taught the kids, you need to be able to take risks. You need to be able to try something new. You need to be able to be creative. And
Yes.
the thing I learned early on is there's no point me saying that to them if I'm not showing that to them. So
Yeah.
if I want my kids to be able to take risks, if I want them to try new things and put themselves out there, I needed to do that myself. And one of my goals as a father is to create an environment where my wife and my two kids know that they can do anything. And if they fail, not a problem. You've learned from it. Try something else. If you
Yes.
make a decision that didn't work, you know what? Just make another decision. Done.
Right.
Yeah. So I needed to show that by putting myself out there. So I would take risks. I would try new things. I would go way, way out of my comfort zone, by the way. And we've seen it with the kids. They both have their own companies. My son's a web developer. My daughter runs a digital marketing agency. And my wife, at the time that I kind of decided that this was it, I needed to do another big risky thing, which was start my own startup, which was Common Ledger in the day.
Yeah.
She felt so free to be able to go, you know what, I've always been working in early childcare, but I have this calling and this passion to work with people with addictions. So
Yeah.
I need to but at the time I quit my well-paying job back then and said, I'm going to create this business, which means 6 months of no income. She goes, interesting timing. I'm about to
Right.
leave my job so that I can study. And so I looked at her and she just said the thing that has always resonated with me. She just looked at me and said, well, when have we never landed on our feet? And I went, that's exactly it. I'm a
Yes.
firm
We'll,
believer
we'll
in...
jump off the cliff together.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thelma and Louise it. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
But also there's a scripture that's really important to me where we're talking about not worrying about what the birds of the air, not worrying about what they wear or things that what they eat. I can never remember scripture by heart.
Yes.
It's really frustrating. I can remember Star Wars quotes like nothing,
Right.
but it's like
But we're totally with you. Yes. We got it. Yeah.
But all of that was about if you're focused on the right thing. For me, it was all about perspective. Whereas God's saying, look,
Yes.
if you are firmly fixated on doing the right thing for Him, and
Yes.
God says, if God says, I want you to do this, you're like, okay, God, well, how do we do this? And not worry about all those other things. They all line up. And if they
Yeah.
don't, if you end up in a situation like we've been in the past where we had no money or, particularly when we first got married, been married
Yes.
25 years this year, by the way. So
Oh, congrats.
huge
Yes.
milestone.
Yes.
Right in the middle of lockdown. So lovely anniversary.
Actually, we're coming up on 26 here in just 3 months. And the
well
same
done.
thing is I'm thinking, I hope everything is, you know what I mean? Completely back open. So you can actually travel. Yeah.
Yeah. We had a big trip planned. We were going to go on a big cruise. That got
Yes.
cancelled. We were going to go to Sydney and do a week of shopping. We're going to travel around Asia. Yeah. All of it cancelled. So
I'm going to have to delay. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
yeah, but so anyway, so we've kind of emulated that and created this environment where they can do that, and that's so this year another major milestone came up. In fact, we've realized that every year for the last probably 5 or 6 years we've made major decisions every year, but this year it was, I'm going to leave the comfort zone that is this very well-paying job and what I know I'm very, very good at, and I'm going to try something new. I knew I was called to write this next book, so I had to make a decision and take some action on that calling. So I resigned from Cigna, one of the easiest and hardest decisions ever, and embarked on writing my next book, which is called Anti-Perfect, which really is about dealing with self-doubt. It's about rewriting your own mental operating system, essentially, so that you can kind of take those risks and push yourself forward.
Yeah.
And in doing that, COVID hit, and a lot of the businesses and the entrepreneurs that I've been coaching and mentoring, and a lot of the ones I was interviewing for the book, had their entire livelihoods stripped out from underneath them.
Mm.
So in some cases, every revenue stream they had was just no longer, and they
Yes.
still had the bills and the overheads and everything else. So that was challenging, and I love helping people. So I was like, I can't. I said to Leanne, I can't leave this. I can't just go, oh well, that's you. Good luck. I
Yeah.
need to help them.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
started working with a whole pile of people and transforming their business. Going, okay, let's look at. Like I realized this is the stuff I'm really good at. I'm really good at positioning yourself, thought leadership stuff, positioning yourself as a business and as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, and finding additional revenue streams. Like how can you maximize all of these? It's what I've taught my
Mhm.
kids right from when they were really young. So I started doing this with the entrepreneurs, and the results we saw were amazing. Like so many of them pivoted, and one of them, a
Mm.
company I've been dealing with, they run a bricks and mortar cafe where they teach people how to
Okay.
knit and all this, and it's awesome. Everything that they did just got completely shut down, and they were like, "What do we
Yeah.
do?" And I said, "Well, let's put all your products online as a starting point." And they were like, "Well, we've been there, done that, and we don't know how to." No, I'll teach you how to do it. So in a weekend, I taught them basic principles of e-commerce. We set up their online store. The following week, they did a Facebook Live to announce it to their customers, which was the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. These two old women just getting drunk on camera, going, "Oh, we did it ourselves. We did it. We did it." So I was like, "Oh, it's so cool." But two things happened. One of them was they started realizing they're making more money online than they've ever made in their shop,
Mm.
and that their market was so much bigger than they actually anticipated. Then they also found out that because they use Shopify, that they were the 15th highest transaction Shopify shop in Australia, which is phenomenal for people
Wow.
who apparently had no idea of any technology or anything. They were like, "Oh, we don't know how to do
Yes.
this,"
Yeah, this is like
and
a whole new
now
world to them, right? They're like, what
exactly.
is happening?
Yeah, and now they've been inspired to kind of transform their business. And honestly, they're outstripping me with some of the ideas, like the crazy ideas they've come up with. And I'm looking at going, anybody else I'd say that'd never work, but you two, you're just crazy enough that this will work.
Yes.
So, so seeing those kind of results,
People just want them to do more Facebook lives. They're
yeah,
like, we will buy whatever
100%.
you're doing.
Well, they said to me, this is hilarious. They said, "Oh, we need you to teach us about social media." And I went, "Why?" And they go, "Oh, because we don't know what we're doing." I said, "Well, tell me what you're doing." I knew what they were doing. I said, "Tell me what you're doing." They go,
Yeah.
"Oh, we do a Facebook Live every week." And I said, "Yeah, how many people do you get on your Facebook Live?" "Oh, I don't know, about 500 to 700." I said, "Mm-hmm." "And how many of those are engaged?" They said, "Oh, it's really annoying. Everybody." I went, "Yeah, you do know big brands would kill for those kind of
Right.
metrics." But
Yes.
they're in their mind, they thought they didn't know what they're doing because their entire videos start like this: them going, "Is it on? Is it on? Like, if we push the right button, I don't. If we push the right, I don't know if they can hear us. Can you hear us? Hello?" And they thought they had to be
It's so
professional.
real. People
I know,
actually
I know.
love real.
And
Yes.
that's the thing I said to them is you've tapped into the one thing that a lot of marketers and entrepreneurs miss, which is authenticity. And I said, don't
Yes.
ever change. Don't be professional. Be you. So
Yes.
yeah, they're just honestly, I love those guys to bits. They're just doing so well. But yeah, so I kind of realized at that point, I'd left Cigna. I'm writing this book. Then I just realized I get to help so many people, and it is just the most fulfilling and awesome thing. So I started coaching more people. This time, charging them for it.
Right. Yes.
I realized I was coaching so many people for free. I'm like, yeah, that's not sustainable.
Yes, I know. We're all going to start our own support group of those that are like, we love to serve. Everybody wants us to mentor them. And we're like,
Yep.
we probably need revenue that we're helping you get.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was interesting. The two things that kind of helped me there, by the way. So
Yeah.
I was praying about this, going, okay, what? I knew I needed to deal with this mindset that I just give this stuff away for free.
Yes. Yeah.
And the two things that came to me, one was a saying that someone had said to me once, which is, if people invest, then they're invested. So if
Yeah.
I'm working with people, there's so much more invested. In fact, one of the people who approached me to coach him can't afford me. And immediately the rescuer in me goes, right, drop your prices down, do it for free, because
Right.
his story
Yes.
is really important. People need to hear what he has to offer. But I'm like, that's the wrong thing to do. So I
Yeah.
said to him, here's my rates. And I gave him a bit of a discount. I knew he still couldn't really afford it. He went out
Yeah.
and he's doing a GoFundMe campaign because he's raising money so that he can use me as his coach. And I'm going, no matter what I say to him, everything I teach him, he's going to grab that and run with it. Like he's going
Yes.
to use everything because he's had to fight to get it. That was such a transformative thing in my thinking. It was like,
Mhm.
whoa. And then the other thing I kind of realized as well is I need to help as many people as possible. This is what I'm passionate about. I really want to create a movement of entrepreneurs that are supporting each other and helping each other. To do that, it needs to be scalable and it needs to be sustainable, and you need to ask for money for that. So
Right.
that was an
Yes.
interesting challenge in itself.
And I'm also learning that, like, as you're speaking, I'm like, oh, he's preaching to me. Yep.
Yeah,
And I'm sure a
yeah.
lot of people listening, it's the same thing. They're like,
Oh, no way.
oh,
I'm still
yep, yep,
preaching to
yep.
myself. Yeah, I'm still preaching to myself here. I need to keep learning this,
Yeah.
and then so doing that, and then the other thing I think I said to you before, working on radio was one of my favorite jobs ever. I love
Yeah.
radio. Ever since when I was 7, I think it was, I built my first crystal radio set, and I used to listen. Like, that was my escape place that I had from my childhood. And I used to listen to this radio, and I would listen to the DJs and think, these guys have it all, They have this amazing job. They get to listen to music and interact with each other and take callers, and it's
Right. Your
incredible.
extrovert side is like, this
Oh,
is
I
the dream.
know. And I just wanted to be these people. But then I got a job on radio and realized it is amazing. I loved it so much. But,
Yes.
oh, man, they pay nothing.
Right.
It was,
You didn't
it
realize
was,
all those
oh,
DJs were sitting, all the announcers, they were sitting in like studio apartments for, yes.
yep.
Yeah. That's what they were.
Eating pot noodles because they can't afford real food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, I realized I had my business, which was taking off when I was working on radio. So I had to give that
Yeah.
up. And I've always wanted to get back into that. And podcasting is the new radio. And I'm like, holy crap, I've wanted to do this for so long. And now I've got this time, I can do it. And I was interviewed for a podcast in the UK. It's a really big digital marketing podcast. And the
Yeah.
host is awesome. We've become good mates. And he issued me a challenge off air, and he said, I want you to start a podcast by the end of this year. And I went, done. And he goes, I will listen to it. I'll be on your show. I'll get you connected. Done. So I launched that about 6 weeks ago. Yeah, I think about 5 or 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it has just been the most fun ever. I mean, you know this yourself, right? Like,
Yes.
just meeting awesome people and talking to them, and I feel like it's just me having a beer with someone. It's
Well,
incredible.
no, it is. It's so true. We were talking about this
Yeah.
before we went live. I said, why have I waited so long to
Yeah.
do table talk interviews and to do these podcasts? I feel like it's a vacation and you're sitting meeting new people, and people from different countries are just like, I said, I love these people. These are people I want to be friends with. And so I told my husband, even today, in between, I said, okay, I've got to go do another recording. I said, this is so fun. I feel like I'm like cheating my workday. It's amazing. And I said, I have so been missing out. It's brilliant.
It's incredible when you get that revelation that you can actually enjoy your job. I mean, that's crazy, but yeah.
Yes, it is. So I cannot agree more. And my extrovert side is so happy.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And yes, very, very much so.
Oh, and I have met some people who have very quickly become very good friends. Because you get to sit down and talk about something you're both passionate about, which is marketing and sales and things. And there's instant connections. You're like, oh, this is so cool. So,
yes, and getting to find your circle of driven people that it's okay. And I think that sometimes Christians think that it's not okay to be driven with new ideas in the marketplace. And it's frustrating because God who created, and I've said this so many times, but God who created the world out of nothing but his own creativity.
Yeah.
Why would he not want us to use the ideas he gives us? And so people will say, well, you know what, I would like to do this, or I'd like to do missions, or I'd like to be home with my kids more, whatever it happens to be. Or, thinking of your wife, I really have this heart to help those with addiction. And they're like, oh, if God would only provide, whatever it is. And I'm thinking, or I couldn't really do that. It's not practical. It's just not sensible. And I'm thinking, well, God is probably giving you those divine ideas for you to do something with them, but you have to be brave enough to say yes.
Yeah.
I always tell people, and I don't know if this is great advice, but I think it's great advice, is that instead of saying all the things that could go right, I said, let's play the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
If you do this and the worst thing happens, is your life, like your world will not end. I mean, the worst case is it falls flat on its face. You have debt to pay, like whatever it happens to be,
Yeah.
Like, that's the worst case. What is the best case?
Yeah.
And true, it's probably going to be in between for a little while. And when it takes the fear out of saying, worst case, what could happen? Why are you afraid of it? Like, let's just talk about it. And what would you do if that happened?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what I
Huge
mean?
fan of that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I was just going to say, what are
yeah.
your thoughts on that after you
Oh
take
no, huge fan of that. The
that?
only downside of that, by the way, is when you say to me, "What's the worst that can happen?"
Yeah.
I read far too many comics. I watch far too many movies. I'll go, "Oh yeah, maybe a global pandemic, an asteroid will hit the Earth,
Yeah.
a giant earthquake," and yeah. So I try not to go there.
Right. Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah. But listen,
yeah,
at that point, though, if your business failed, who cares? An
yeah,
asteroid
exactly.
just hit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So we can talk
yeah,
that up. All
yeah.
right.
Global apocalypse. We'll just adapt. Yeah, I've seen Mad Max. I know what to do.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
But now,
Um,
to your point though, and this is a huge factor in dealing with self doubt and that as well, is
yeah.
because you get these internal voices, which, by the way, we know are not from God, going,
Right.
"You're not worthy, you're not worthy," and God doesn't say that at all.
Yes.
We've got these internal voices telling us all these different things, like, "Oh, but what would happen if this, or what would happen?" Like for me, one of the challenges, and this is going to sound really random and weird, but
Yeah.
putting myself out there, like particularly saying I'm out there as a coach now, which means
Right.
businesses can pay me to work with them. I immediately think, oh yeah, but what would people that I've worked with before think? What would their opinion be? And they because they know, they see your warts and all and everything, and
Right.
and they'll just have a low. You know what? They may do. Who cares? Right?
Yeah.
In reality, people don't actually think about you as much as you think they do.
Yes.
And but the thing is, though, and so when those voices start saying, "What if this? What if that? What if this?"
Yep.
I start now trying to consciously go, "Yeah, but what if it works?
Yeah.
What if the business I'm dealing with can transform their business? Like, what if they can build the
Yes.
type of business they really want? What if they can find all these additional revenue streams that they didn't realize were right in front of them?" And so if I could start playing those voices over top of it, then it's like, okay, those other ones maybe not as significant as I thought they were now, So
And
maybe
I think
someone will be offended by me, but I've
but
helped this person's life. Yeah.
one of the things that the verse, and I can't even tell you at the moment where it is, but I'm great at actually quoting verses, but not their reference. It's
Yep.
horrible. But about prophets not being welcome in their own hometown, that they aren't
Yep.
always received because people do know all their warts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just dust off your sandals. Bible times, you dust off those sandals, and now it'd be your chacos, and you just dust those
Yeah.
off, and you keep going. And I think that when we get in our own heads and we listen to the voices, or even what others have said,
Yeah.
that it is that point of, kind of using that verse that, in a different sort of context, but the heart behind it is totally biblical, is that
Yeah.
we are called to serve others.
Yeah.
We are called to serve. And so there is somebody that we can help. And so when we let that get in our head, and so for those listening or watching and you're like, that's me, listen, World Wide Web, friends, go help people that are not literally in your hometown.
Yeah.
I mean,
100%.
because sometimes I think that is actually helpful to get over that, to say, oh, I'm helping over here. And it actually will give you confidence to help those people in your hometown, because like what Vince, they're not thinking about you as much as you think they are.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is often we project a lot of negativity onto these situations. And
Yes.
I had this hilarious interaction with a business here where he rang me out. We went out and had a beer and all this. And I was talking about the fact that I'm doing this coaching now. And he just went, "Oh, I didn't know you did that." I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes,
Yeah.
"I need that." And I'm like, I always thought he's the ideal customer for me. I can see, honestly, I can spend 5 minutes and give him 15 different ways that he can transform his business,
Yeah.
and position himself as a leader in the city as well, which is a really interesting one. But I'm looking at it going, I never thought he would want to work with me, but he just didn't even realize I did this. And as soon as he did, he goes, "Dude, I'm in." I'm like, okay,
Yes.
this is easy. Yeah.
And I love that is also a story for your new book.
Yes,
I
exactly.
mean, because that is a real life. How many people are in our own backyard that we think,
Uh-huh.
oh, I'm a prophet in my own hometown. Nobody even wants me, and they're like,
Yep.
why aren't you helping us in your own backyard?
Oh yeah, and the funny thing is, someone else as well. So I've just had I've got a virtual summit I'm working on.
Oh, yes, and I
So
do want you to end up sharing about that as well. But yeah, go ahead.
But
'Cause
part of
it's
the
pretty
process
cool.
of that was asking different people, and there was someone there who's one of my mentors. I'm like, there's no way they'd want to be part of this,
Yeah.
Who would it? So I was on a coaching call with them, and at the end, I got really nervous. I got butterflies, and I just went, "I'd really like you to speak at the summit," and they just went, I'd be highly offended if you didn't ask me, Vince. I was waiting for you to ask me, and I'm like, oh man, like, what a moron! Like, just my brain sometimes just irritates me.
Yes.
But yeah,
And I'm so excited about the book you're writing because as you were talking before we went on air, it's like such a human thing. It is not a
yeah,
God thing. It is a
no,
human thing.
yeah.
And that is so not God's heart for us.
Well, God
Um,
doesn't condemn. This is the other thing, right? He
yes.
judges, but he doesn't condemn. So when you're feeling things that are
Yes.
condemning you, that is
Yeah.
not of Him. It's as simple as that.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
very easy to discern that that is not of God. Like,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
so I always tell people, here's a great way if you're a visual learner.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
Jesus Christ was standing in front of me in physical form, would
Yeah.
he speak those words out of his mouth to me?
Oh, nice. Yeah, I like
And
that.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they're
Yeah.
like, but maybe God. I'm like, nope. Could you see him standing in front of you and speaking those words? Great. If not, you know that it is you or it's the enemy that is just getting all up in your head, or society. And so because
Yeah.
I try to use that visual, like, would Jesus in flesh say those things to me? You know, if he was standing in front of me, well, guess what?
Yeah.
He's not saying it through the Spirit either. So stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
So
thing.
that's,
It's not actually that hard to recognize His voice. Does it come from
it's,
love? And is it
yes.
uplifting? Is it edifying? Or is it condemning? Because, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I
Uh,
think too, for those that are listening that are, in the marketplace, and it actually doesn't even have to be marketplace, but where
yeah.
you really feel called to take this brave step, to do something new,
Yeah.
that to find like-minded people,
Oh, yeah.
that are also driven to be brave and adventurous in doing those things, that they can talk you out of your own head and say things like, if Jesus was standing in front of you, would he speak those words? You know what I mean? Because it's
Yep.
so, like, that is what the body of Christ is supposed to do. Like, we're supposed to talk each other off the ledge.
Yes.
Like,
Literally and metaphorically. Yeah.
yes, exactly. I need you to come back to reality. That is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
God's heart for you.
I love
But
that.
I do think that people need a safe place to be able to say those human things with no judgment, but to be rerouted back to where we can laugh at our crazy. You know what I mean? To laugh
Yep.
like, so yesterday I was thinking, and I'm thinking about like with your book, and then you're like, oh, but all the data points to what I'm saying is not even true.
Yeah, and that was actually a big motivation for the book as well, because a lot of the
Yeah.
times I've kind of realized over the past 5 years in particular, when I'm coaching people or mentoring them, I very rarely help people with a pure marketing problem. Often, if it's personal development stuff, it's often them coming to me going, I'm in over my head, I'm freaking out, I know that my boss is going to be unhappy with me, or this, I feel like I'm not right for this, and you have to, basically what I would see is I would see their thoughts and their feelings over here, and then I would
Yeah.
see the evidence over here, and you realize these two things aren't aligned. So aligning them makes them go, oh, actually, maybe I am pretty good at this. Maybe
Yeah.
I do add value to that. So that's where a lot of the book came from, and that's I had to do this exercise for myself. Very hard exercise to do, very humbling exercise. Is actually look at the people that you're impacting, look at how many people you've changed their life or you've helped them to get where they are, and look at what you've done for them, and then look at your thoughts and feelings and go, are these two things aligned? No, they're not.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's
so
so
that made it
good.
a lot easier to step into coaching. It made it a lot easier to make the decision to leave Cigna. I'm now, by the way, I'm writing 2 books at the same time.
Yes,
And tell
of
you this
course
before.
you are. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
This is why we all should be our own support group. This is great.
yeah.
Overachievers. Yeah.
So while I'm writing Anti-Perfect, but at the same time, there's another book, and it came from basically I've got all these different things that I'm known for in the marketing industry, like these different modalities or methodologies, and none of them in themselves are enough to write a full book on. They're all
Right.
just methods that people use, and one of them was in my first book, in Chasing the Insights, and I remember going to a marketing agency. I'd never dealt with these guys, I didn't know them, but I'm there at the marketing agency, and the woman was saying to me, "Oh yeah, we're going to do this thing called coffee line test." And I went, "Wait, coffee line test?" She looked at me and she goes, "Oh yeah, let me explain." I'm going, I'm thinking, I know what it is. I came up with it, and I was
Right.
like. And looking at her, kind of puzzled, and she was going, "Yeah, it's basically this principle. It was created by this amazing guy." And I look behind her, and I see my book sitting on the shelf, and I'm like, and then she went, "Wait a minute, you're Vince Warnock, the
You're
author." And I went, and she went bright red, and I went bright red. It was like, so it was really interesting hearing someone's feedback that unfiltered, where they didn't know that
yes,
I was that person,
business.
but it
But
also
at
made me
least you still made
realize,
an impact. Yes,
oh,
that
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, some of these things I need to get them out there. I need to help people because I've seen people using them and it's really helping. And my wife, we're going for a walk, and she goes, "It's almost like you need to put them together in a book and call it, I don't know, the 13 Underground Secrets." And I went, "Ha, that's so lame. That's awesome. Damn, she came up with a better idea than I did."
You're
Oh
like,
no.
wait, who has the marketing background,
I
right?
know, I know. Most of my great ideas just come from her, by the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
That whole team, we are one. Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
You
Oh yeah.
totally
Oh,
have permission to use them all.
yeah, 100%. So I'm writing that. So they'll probably be out before my second book. So my third book
Yeah.
before my second. Yeah, but
Yes.
they'll all be out this year, which is my goal. So
Oh,
yeah,
I love it. And I
yeah,
think, do you find that as you're doing it and you're seeing that, oh, this is really helping people, that it takes off the imposter syndrome the more
yeah,
you step out into saying, why was I making such a big deal?
yeah,
And it doesn't mean that that won't happen again, but I think it would get easier.
yeah. Well, the other thing too is you're spot on. It's making you realize it's not about you.
Yeah.
And this is the interesting thing. Like for the summit, for example, I knew that I wanted to do this. I have so many motivations to want to do this summit. I wanted people to hear from voices they've never heard from before. I've connected with so many amazing people through the podcast that are just they're practitioners. They're out there. They're doing things that are going to help people, and they're helping so
Yeah.
many lives. And I'm going, I need to get these people together. People need to hear from them. And I'm going, okay, to do this though is going to be a huge risk. I need to run at this. I'm going to put on this summit. It may fail, it may succeed. We'll find out. But I kind of realized that it's not about whether I feel like it's going to fail or succeed or whether I feel comfortable or uncomfortable. It's actually about the people's lives that are going to be changed from hearing from all these different people. And it's
Yes.
about giving them an opportunity to be heard as well. So as soon as you project it onto other people and you realize, I kind of have no choice but to do this because otherwise I'm denying somebody the opportunity to
Yeah.
succeed, which is not great. So yeah,
Right. And, I always think too that, there's, and I'm loosely quoting it, but in the Bible, it talks about the enemy being ashes under our feet.
yeah,
And so really anything that is not of God is our enemy. So whether they're talking about the devil or our own thoughts, our flesh, whatever it
yeah,
happens to be. And so I said, every time that we take a step in obedience, whether it's writing a book or serving, or it doesn't matter what it is.
yeah,
But every time that we take a step in obedience, it's putting those negative things that are not of God under our feet where it belongs. And each step puts it really in its rightful place, which is not in your head,
love
but,
that.
beneath you. Like you do not need to walk in that, just those ways and those ways of thinking. So I tell
Yeah,
people I want you to picture those negative things under your feet and you are literally stomping it with every one step of the process.
I
And those
love that.
visuals, especially for visual learners, it's like, okay, yep. And they kind of get that warrior call up in them saying, oh, yeah, the game is on now. So I
Uh-huh.
love it.
Yeah.
So as we finish up our eclectic talk today, which I have so enjoyed, talk about from a parenting
Yep.
perspective that, one of the things that I love is that, uh, we're not in our 20s. And so some people say,
Oh.
right, I know it's so sad. That some people will say, hey, go make those, try those things when you're young because then life happens and you can't take those risks anymore. And so in society, we start to train people that, well, when you hit your 30s, you might be able to do some risks, but 40s, you need to really have your life in order. And by 50, do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I love when people are even in their 70s and 80s and they're like, I'm going to do something new. And I'm thinking,
Hmm.
wow, like, yes, I want to be that spunky 80-year-old that's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Same.
I've done all these things. And you know what? Let's try this. Do you know what I mean?
By the way, to clarify, I'm not 80. That's not what we're saying here.
Because we are not. And if you're listening to this,
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
not 80. Okay.
Yeah.
Just because each of us have been married over 25 years, it does not mean that we are super, super
Exactly.
old. But with that, I think that people are afraid to try new things.
Yeah.
And what advice would you give people that are thinking of leaving this great job? Like when you left Cigna, we said before we went on air, people probably thought you were insane going,
Oh, they did. Yeah.
wow, that's
I started to
security.
think I was insane.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. You're like, wait, maybe, because
Yeah.
we see that as security.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a lack of faith of trusting what God is telling you to do, that He's
Yeah.
got provision on the other end. And it may come in a wacky sort of style that we just aren't sure what to make of. But what encouragement would you give people, one, about that, about
Yeah.
just being brave enough to do it, but also, having, a spouse and kids, and there's people depending on you,
Yeah.
how to navigate that. So what would you say to them on that front?
Probably three things I'd say to you. First, you're going to make
Yeah.
many mistakes. Don't worry about that. I've made so many, it's unbelievable. Even when one of my main decisions, by the way, for leaving Common Ledger when I had my company, was I had to be on the road nonstop. So most of our clients were in Australia, the UK, all around the world. Very
Yeah.
few of them here in New Zealand. So I had to be on the road, and I came back. My son was 12 at the time, and he sat me down and said to me, "Dad, I know you're building a really good company, but I think we need to spend more time together."
Mm.
And that one quote did two things to me. It split me down the middle. Half of me was incredibly proud that we've created such an environment with our family, with my wife and my kids, and that where
Yes.
we can be open and be emotionally honest with each other.
Yeah.
So that was a very proud moment. But the other half of me is going, "Oh." So
Right.
I was like, actually, I said to him, "That's a really good point. Hold that thought." And I picked up the phone, and I saw his eyes roll like, "Oh, Tess jumping on the phone again."
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
said,
yeah.
"Right," and I rang my co-founder and said, "Hey guys, just letting you know, I'm out. I'm done. I need to spend more
Mm.
time with my family, and I'll stay on as majority shareholder because I was the majority shareholder at the time.
Yeah.
I'll stay on as a shareholder, but we'll hire someone to replace me." And then we ended up selling the company anyway.
Yeah.
And I hung up the phone. They're screaming down the phone at me, by the way. Oh man, sailors would blush some of the things I heard on that phone. So I hung up the phone, and I looked at my son. He goes, "Man, that was easy." And I was like, "Well, you're important to me,
Yeah.
and I want
That's so
so
profound though. I mean,
yeah,
that's not just saying it, but it's actually putting action to what you have
yeah."
built up, that environment of communication. It's
Yeah,
good.
but I think that's the other part there as well is you're going to make mistakes, but it's okay because nothing's irreparable. And you can
Mhm.
turn around in a moment like that and go, actually, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yes, okay, make a different decision.
Yes.
And one of the keys, particularly this year with the big change that I've made leaving Cigna, is making sure my family are on the journey with me. And so I openly, like, I drop my son off at school every morning. I don't have to, but I drop him off at school every morning so we can have a chat. And he
Yes.
always asks me, he goes, "Oh, what do you got on today? Who are you talking to today? You do a podcast recording today? You doing summit stuff? Who are you coaching? Or what's their big challenge?" And so we're talking about all this, and it's that
Yes.
he gets to be a part of this, and he
Mm.
gets to have a say in it as well, which is awesome. So there's that, but there's also the other aspect, which I talked about, my motivation for putting myself out there, and I think that's probably the biggest advice I would give to all of you is, and particularly if you're older, you've got a family, you
Yep.
want to show them that they can do this themselves. If you stay in your
Mm.
comfort zone, you're teaching them to stay in their comfort zone. But really, there's so many things that they can bring to this world. There's so many ways that they can contribute, and so many callings that they may miss because they stay in that safe zone. So it's not about you, and it's not about your discomfort, and it's not about necessarily even whether your comfort zone itself. But the fact that you step out of it is going to be inspiring, and that's what being a leader is to your family.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
That is really great advice.
yeah,
Those that are listening or watching, you can connect with Vince at chasinginsights.com. And
yeah.
we'll also put, like I said,
Oh,
in the
yeah.
in the descriptions, in the show notes, everything that you need to be able to connect in with him. So Vince, thanks for being here today. We
Oh,
really
thanks for
enjoyed
having
it.
me. It's so much fun. Yeah.
This is eclectic conversations are the best.
Oh, yes, yes, indeed.
They are the best. Okay, friends, until next time, we'll see you on the next episode. Lead well and, do family with purpose. That is two things that just go hand in hand. So we'll see you
Yeah.
soon, friends.